You gave me steel, Blacksmith. Get ready, I claim you now, said the Apache fugitive woman. Elias had always lived on the edge of the small frontier town, far enough from the dusty streets and crowded saloons to enjoy a life of quiet, yet close enough that he could trade his metalwork when needed. His blacksmith shop was modest, a simple wooden building with a thatched roof, its walls darkened by years of soot and fire. Inside, the air was always warm, scented with hot iron and the faint smell of coal smoke. Elias liked it that way. It was a place where he could control everything: the swing of his hammer, the shape of a blade, the rhythm of the fire. Life outside his shop, in the chaotic world beyond the hills, often seemed loud, unpredictable, and dangerous. Here, in his forge, he was in charge. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the distant hills, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, Elias heard a soft, uneven sound outside his shop. It wasn't the usual rustle of animals or the wind through the dry grass. It was deliberate, a careful movement that stopped him mid-swing as he hammered a piece of red-hot iron. He set the hammer down and walked to the door, wiping his hands on a leather apron. There, standing at the edge of the clearing, was a woman. She was unlike anyone Elias had ever seen. Her hair was long and black, pulled back from her face, and her skin was tanned from the sun, marked with faint scars that spoke of past struggles. Her clothes were worn but sturdy, made for traveling long distances. She had a small satchel slung across her shoulder, and her eyes, sharp, alert, and full of quiet intensity, looked straight at him. Elias instinctively stepped back, unsure whether to reach for the tools by the door or simply greet her. "Good evening," he said cautiously, his voice steady but carrying a hint of curiosity. "You're far from town. Can I help you?" The woman's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "I need steel," she said simply. "I need tools to survive." Her voice was calm, but there was a strength in it, a determination that made Elias pause. Most travelers came through town asking for food, water, or shelter. Few asked for steel. "Steel?" Elias echoed. He gestured to his forge. "I can make tools, knives, maybe a blade or two. But why do you need them?" She stepped closer, her gaze scanning the shop with careful interest. "I travel alone," she said. "I need to protect myself. The world is not kind to people like me. The roads are dangerous, and there are those who would take what I have or stop me from going where I must." Elias nodded slowly. He had seen people come through the desert roads, travelers with stories of hardship, of bandits, or of soldiers and lawmen who were more interested in enforcing their own rules than helping the helpless. He could sense that this woman, Nayeli, as she would later tell him, was not just asking for tools casually. There was urgency in her tone, a quiet insistence that left no room for argument. "Sit by the fire," he said finally, motioning to a worn wooden bench near the hearth. "Tell me what you need, and I'll see if I can help." As she came closer and settled onto the bench, setting her satchel beside her, for a moment she simply looked into the flames, as if drawing strength from the warmth and light. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she began to speak. "My people, they were taken from me," she said, her eyes distant. "I ran when I could, but there are always those who chase. I've survived by hiding, by moving quietly, by knowing the land. But I need something more. I need to defend myself, to make a way forward without fear." Elias listened, feeling a mixture of concern and admiration. Her words painted a picture of struggle and courage, of a life lived on the edge of survival. He had met many people in the town, Farmers, traders, a few soldiers, but none like her. She spoke with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen much, endured much, and still refused to be broken. "What kind of tools do you need?" he asked. "A knife? Something stronger?" Nayeli looked at him, and for the first time, a small flicker of trust appeared in her eyes. "A knife, yes, but also things to help me travel. Wire, small tools for making shelter, something I can rely on if I am alone. Can you do that?" Elias nodded. "I can make all of that," he said. "It will take time, but I can forge what you need." He glanced at the glowing coals in his forge. "The steel is hot, ready to be shaped. But you'll need to learn how to handle it. A blade is only as strong as the hands that hold it." Nayeli smiled faintly. It was a rare expression, not warm, but appreciative. "I can handle steel," she said simply. "I have learned to survive with little. I can learn to survive with this." The hours passed, and the sun disappeared completely behind the hills. Elias worked at the forge, shaping a strong hunting knife while Nayeli watched. She did not speak much, only occasionally asking questions about the metal, the fire, or the tempering process. Her curiosity was sharp, intelligent, and practical. Elias found himself explaining the work not just as craft, but as life, the careful balance of heat, pressure, and patience. As the knife began to take shape, Elias noticed something about her. She was not afraid of the fire, not afraid of the sparks or the heat. She leaned in slightly, observing the hammering with intent, as if every strike mattered. He realized that she was not just a traveler asking for help. She was a fighter, someone who had endured more than most people ever would, and someone who would not back down from what she needed. When the first knife was finished, polished, and sharp, Elias held it out for her. "It's ready," he said. "Strong, balanced. It will serve you well, but remember, it is only a tool. You are the strength." Nayeli took it in her hands, weighing it carefully. Her fingers wrapped around the handle, and she tested the balance with a few practiced movements. "It is perfect," she said quietly. "Thank you." There was a moment of silence, broken only by the crackling fire. Then she added, almost as if speaking to herself, "This will help me, but I still have a long journey ahead." Elias nodded. He understood more than she realized. The world outside was vast and dangerous, and this knife, though strong, could not protect her from everything. But he also saw the determination in her eyes, the kind that could turn a weapon into a lifeline, a tool into a shield, and courage into survival. For the first time in years, Elias felt a sense of anticipation. This woman, this stranger, had brought something into his life that he had not known he was missing. The presence of someone as strong, as determined, and as alive as the fire he worked with every day. He did not know what lay ahead for her, or for them, but he knew one thing. Her journey had begun, and he had become a part of it, whether he liked it or not. Outside, the desert night settled in, silent except for the distant howl of a coyote. Inside the forge, the light of the fire cast dancing shadows across the walls. Elias looked at Nayeli, and for the first time he wondered what stories the desert would tell of this encounter, how a blacksmith and a fugitive woman might change each other's lives forever. And for Nayeli, the knife was more than steel. It was a symbol of hope, of trust, and of the first step in a journey that would test every skill, every instinct, and every ounce of courage she possessed. The world outside was dangerous, but inside that small forge, for the first time in a long while, she felt ready. The days that followed were quiet but busy in Elias's forge. Nayeli stayed close, not out of necessity, but by choice. She watched Elias at work each morning, observing the careful rhythm of hammer on metal, the glow of the furnace, and the sparks that flew like tiny stars. She asked questions, not just about the tools he made, but about the land, the rivers, the hills beyond the town, and the safest paths through the desert. Elias answered as best as he could, sometimes patiently, sometimes with a faint smile at her sharp curiosity. Each evening, after the last bit of metal was polished and the fire began to die down, they would sit together outside the forge. The desert sky stretched wide and open, a canvas of stars that seemed endless. Nayeli would speak of her journey, the places she had traveled, and the people she had met. She told him about the small victories she had earned in escaping capture, about the times she had hidden under the hot sun or slept in rocky caves, and about the nights when the wind howled and she had thought she would never see another day. Elias listened in silence, sometimes startled by the strength of her stories. The woman had lived through more in a few years than many people in the town could imagine in a lifetime. She had faced hunger, fear, and relentless danger, yet she carried herself with a quiet pride that made her seem almost untouchable. And still beneath that strength, there was a softness, a longing for someone to see her as more than just a fugitive, more than just a survivor. One afternoon, Nayeli approached the forge with a small, rough piece of metal. She held it carefully in her hand and looked at Elias. "Can you make this into something useful?" she asked. Elias took the metal, examining it closely. It was old and worn, perhaps a piece of scrap someone had discarded, but in her hands it seemed to carry meaning. "I can," he said, setting it into the fire to heat. "It will take patience. Old metal must be treated carefully. If you rush it, it will crack." She nodded, watching intently as he worked, hammering the metal, folding it over, heating it again. Elias explained each step. Nayeli followed his instructions when he handed her a small hammer. At first her movements were stiff, unsure, but soon, with careful attention, she began to feel the metal, understand its rhythm, and shape it into a blade that was strong and balanced. "This is more than just a knife," Elias said quietly. "It is a connection to the land, to survival. It is a part of you now." Nayeli held the finished blade, feeling its weight, its balance, and the smoothness of the edge. She could feel the difference from the first knife he had made for her. This one was hers in a deeper way, forged not just with steel and fire, but with guidance, trust, and understanding. "I will use it wisely," she said. "I will honor it." Days passed, and their bond grew stronger. Elias showed her how to sharpen the edges, to mend broken tools, and to prepare simple traps for food. He explained which plants were safe to eat, how to find water in hidden streams, and how to navigate by the stars when the sun had set. Nayeli absorbed everything, practicing with focus and determination. She was a fast learner, and Elias could see that she had an instinct for survival that went far beyond his teachings. One evening, as the sun set in a deep red sky, Elias noticed Nayeli staring off toward the distant hills. "What are you thinking about?" he asked gently. She did not answer immediately. Her eyes remained on the horizon, where the first hints of darkness crept over the desert. "I'm thinking about the people who chase me," she said finally. "I know they will not stop. I can prepare, but I cannot hide forever. One day, I will have to face them. One day, I will have to be ready." Elias felt a chill run down his spine. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. He had known danger existed, but hearing it from her, speaking it aloud, made it real in a new way. "You will be ready," he said firmly. "But you will not face them alone." Her gaze shifted to him. And in that moment, Elias realized that her trust in him was absolute. It was not blind, but measured, earned through days of shared effort and quiet understanding. She was preparing not just to survive, but to fight, and she wanted him by her side, not just as a helper, but as someone who believed in her. The following morning, they prepared for a short journey. Nayeli needed to test her new skills in the desert, and Elias insisted on accompanying her part of the way. They packed light, taking only essentials: water, food, tools, and the knives they had forged together. The sun was bright, the air dry and warm, as they stepped onto the open land beyond the forge. Nayeli led the way, moving with grace and caution, scanning the horizon constantly. Elias followed, learning to read the subtle signs of the desert, the faint tracks of animals, the patterns of wind on sand, the way shadows shifted with the time of day. Even though he had lived near this land for years, he realized that Nayeli's understanding of it was far deeper. She could sense danger in the smallest movement, find water where he had never thought to look, and move quietly, as if she belonged to the desert itself. As the hours passed, they encountered small challenges: a broken branch across their path, a sudden gust of wind that kicked up dust, and a small, tricky climb over rocky terrain. Each time, Nayeli handled it with skill and confidence, and Elias could not help but admire her. She was fierce but careful, strong but thoughtful. He realized that she was shaping herself not just with tools, but with every decision she made in the wild. At one point, they stopped at a hidden stream, a small oasis in the dry landscape. Nayeli knelt, filling their water containers and drinking deeply. "Water is life," she said softly, looking at Elias. "Those who underestimate it will not survive here." Elias nodded, understanding the wisdom in her words. He had survived in this land, but he knew his life had been safer than hers, shielded by the town and his quiet routine. Nayeli's life had been different, every day a test of endurance, every step a measure of courage. He felt a mix of respect and humility in her presence. That evening, they made camp near a group of rocks that offered shelter from the wind. Nayeli built a small fire, careful to hide its light from any wandering eyes. They ate a simple meal of dried meat and bread, sharing silence as much as conversation. Elias found himself talking more openly than he had in years, sharing memories of his family, his past, and how he had come to settle at the edge of the town. Nayeli listened with quiet attention, offering insights only when he asked. As night fell, the stars above seemed brighter than ever. Nayeli looked up, tracing constellations with her fingers. "The stars guide us," she said. "They have always guided my people. They remind us that even in darkness, there is direction." Elias watched her, feeling a sense of awe. She was a stranger to him in so many ways, yet he felt connected to her in a way he had never experienced. They were two people from different worlds, yet facing the same challenges, learning from each other and surviving together. The next morning, as they prepared to return to the forge, Nayeli turned to Elias. "Thank you," she said simply, "for the knives, for the tools, for trusting me. I know it is dangerous to help someone like me, but you believed I could survive." Elias looked at her, words catching in his throat. "I didn't just believe you could survive," he said finally. "I believe you will thrive, and I will help you however I can." With that, they began the walk back, each step a mixture of caution and confidence. The desert stretched around them, vast and untamed, but for the first time Elias felt he could face it with her by his side. Nayeli, carrying the tools and knives forged by his hands, moved with a sense of purpose and strength. She was no longer just a fugitive. She was a fighter, a traveler, and a survivor. By the time they reached the forge, the sun was high, casting long shadows across the land. Elias set down his pack and looked at Nayeli, realizing that their bond had deepened through these shared days. She had not just learned from him, he had learned from her. Her courage, her insight, and her determination had touched something inside him that he thought had been dormant. That night, as the fire in the forge burned low, they sat outside together in silence, watching the desert stretch into the distance. Elias knew the world outside the town was dangerous, that Nayeli would face challenges he could not always protect her from. But he also knew that together they were stronger, prepared for whatever lay ahead. And Nayeli, holding her knives and tools close, understood that she was not alone in her fight anymore. Their journey had only just begun, but the foundation was set. Trust, skill, courage, and a bond forged in the heat of the forge and the vastness of the desert. Vehemence were fast, precise, and controlled. She struck with just enough force to disarm him without causing unnecessary harm. The other trackers froze, realizing that they were dealing with someone who was not an ordinary traveler. Elias stepped out from behind the rock, hammer raised. "Back away," he called, his voice steady but loud enough to carry across the desert floor. The remaining trackers exchanged uncertain glances. They had expected to intimidate, perhaps to capture, but instead found themselves confronted by two people who moved with skill and coordination. Nayeli did not falter. She held her knife at the ready, her eyes locked on the nearest tracker. "Leave now," she said firmly. "Turn back before this ends badly for you." The trackers hesitated, weighing their options. One of them raised his rifle slightly, testing her resolve. Nayeli's grip tightened on her knife. "I warned you," she said, her voice carrying a quiet but undeniable threat. "I do not ask twice." Elias could see the determination in her eyes, the same determination that had carried her through countless dangers before she met him. He felt a surge of pride and concern all at once. They had trained, prepared, and now it was time to put everything they had learned to the test. The closest tracker dropped his weapon and raised his hands in surrender, recognizing the skill and courage in Nayeli's stance. The other two looked at each other, unsure of whether to advance or retreat. Nayeli did not wait for hesitation. She moved forward with confidence, forcing them to retreat step by step. By the time the sun was low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert, the trackers had fled. Their boots kicked up dust as they ran, leaving behind the silence of the desert once more. Nayeli and Elias lowered their weapons, breathing heavily but relieved. They had survived the encounter, not through brute force alone, but through coordination, courage, and quick thinking. Elias looked at Nayeli, his eyes reflecting a mixture of admiration and concern. "You handled that remarkably," he said. "I knew you were skilled, but that was extraordinary." Nayeli smiled faintly, wiping sweat from her brow. "It is not skill alone," she said. "It is understanding the land, understanding the people who hunt you, and trusting yourself to act when necessary. We survived because we worked together." Elias nodded, realizing the truth in her words. He had learned much from her in the past days, the patience, the careful observation, the quiet strength that came from experience and necessity. He felt a deep respect for her resilience, and he also understood that this danger would not be the last. The world beyond the town was unpredictable, and those who sought to capture Nayeli would not give up easily. That night, they made camp behind a cluster of boulders, the fire low and careful to avoid detection. The desert sky was clear, stars shining brightly above them. They ate in silence, each lost in thought, reflecting on the day's events and what might come next. Elias spoke finally, breaking the quiet. "We handled them well, but we cannot rely on luck alone. We need a plan for the next encounter, if it comes." Nayeli nodded, her eyes serious. "I have ideas," she said. "We can set traps, use the terrain to our advantage, and stay one step ahead. The desert can be our ally if we understand it, if we move carefully and think ahead." Together they began discussing strategies, reviewing what they had learned from the encounter, and planning for the future. Each suggestion was practical, each plan grounded in observation and experience. They worked quietly but with determination, understanding that survival required not just skill, but preparation and foresight. As the night deepened, the desert around them seemed almost peaceful again, but Elias and Nayeli knew better. Danger lurked beyond every ridge, behind every rock, waiting for those who were unprepared. They had survived today, but tomorrow might bring new challenges, greater threats, and moments that would test their courage and resolve in ways they could not yet imagine. Through it all, their bond strengthened. They had faced danger together, relied on each other, and learned to trust not just their skills, but their instincts. The experience brought them closer, forging a connection that was as strong as the steel they had worked with in the forge. Elias realized that Nayeli was not just a student of survival, but a teacher, showing him courage, wisdom, and determination he had rarely seen in another person. By the time the first light of dawn touched the desert, they were packed and ready to move again. They had survived the immediate danger, but they understood that their journey was far from over. The desert stretched endlessly before them, challenging and unforgiving, but also full of opportunity for those who were prepared and vigilant. Nayeli adjusted her satchel, checking the knives and tools they had forged. She looked at Elias, her eyes steady and determined. "We move carefully now," she said. "The trackers will not give up. We must stay ahead, stay smart, and trust each other." Elias nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Together," he said, "whatever comes, we face it together." With that, they stepped into the desert, moving as one, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. The trackers were gone for now, but the encounter had shown them the reality of the world beyond the forge and the town. Danger was constant, but with skill, trust, and courage, they could survive and perhaps even thrive in the harsh desert landscape. As they walked, Elias reflected on the day's events and the lessons they had learned. He thought about the strength in Nayeli's eyes, the precision of her movements, and the quiet confidence that had carried them through danger. He realized that their journey was not just about survival, but about growth, understanding, and the bond they were forging with each step. And Nayeli, walking beside him, understood something too. She had faced countless threats before, but never had she felt such a connection with someone who respected her skills, shared her burdens, and stood by her in danger. Elias was more than a companion. He was a partner in the true sense of the word, someone who could match her courage, and someone she could trust with her life. Together they moved forward, aware that the desert held many more tests, but ready to face them as a team. They had survived the trackers, learned from their encounter, and strengthened the bond that would carry them through the challenges yet to come. The journey was far from over, but for now, they had each other, and that was enough to face the wide, wild world before them. The next few days were quieter, but that quiet brought its own tension. The desert seemed calm, almost peaceful, yet both Elias and Nayeli knew danger could appear at any moment. They moved carefully, sticking to hidden trails and avoiding open plains where they might be spotted. The sun was relentless during the day, burning the sand and rocks, while nights were cold, forcing them to huddle close by the fire. Every step, every sound, and every movement required attention. Nayeli moved like someone born to the desert. Her eyes scanned constantly, and she seemed to know instinctively where to place her feet, how to find water, and which plants were safe to touch. Elias, though strong and experienced, relied on her guidance more than he admitted. He had thought he knew the land, but Nayeli's understanding went far deeper. She had survived not just by skill, but by knowledge passed down from her people, and by experience earned through hardship. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and red, Nayeli paused near a cluster of low rocks. "We should rest here tonight," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge of thoughtfulness in it. "This spot gives us protection from wind and sightlines from anyone who might be watching. It is small, but it is safe enough for one night." Elias nodded and began gathering small branches to build a fire. As he worked, he watched her move with quiet precision, arranging stones for shelter, preparing a small area for cooking, and checking the surrounding terrain for any signs of intruders. Her care and attention reminded him of the first time he had seen her in his forge, handling the hammer and steel with precision and focus. That same discipline and determination carried into the wilderness. Once the fire was ready, they sat on opposite sides of it, each lost in thought. The flames flickered, casting dancing shadows across the sand and rocks. Elias finally broke the silence. "You've been quiet today," he said gently. "Is something on your mind?" Nayeli looked into the fire, her eyes reflecting the orange glow. "I've been thinking about my past," she said. "It is not something I speak of often, but you should know. I cannot hide forever, and I need you to understand why I cannot stop, why I must keep moving." Elias listened, sensing the weight behind her words. He did not speak, letting her continue. "I was taken from my family when I was young," she began, her voice steady but soft. "Our land, our traditions, our people, they were all threatened. I had to run to survive, to keep what little freedom I had left. I have traveled through deserts, mountains, and rivers, always avoiding those who would capture me, always staying one step ahead." She paused, glancing at Elias. "Every step I've taken has been to protect myself and to honor the memory of those I lost." He had known hardship in his life, but the struggles she had faced were on another level entirely. "You've been through more than I can imagine," he said softly. "I cannot pretend to understand it fully, but I do know this: you are strong, and your strength has kept you alive." Nayeli nodded, her gaze distant. "Strength alone is not enough," she said. "You must have wisdom, patience, and courage. You must know when to fight and when to hide, when to trust and when to be cautious. I have learned all of these through trial, through mistakes, and through loss." Elias considered her words, realizing that she was not just sharing her story, but teaching him something deeper about life and survival. Her experience was a map of lessons, each one forged in the fire of danger, each one shaping who she was today. As the night deepened, Nayeli began to tell him about the people she had encountered on her journey. Some were kind and had offered help, while others were cruel, seeking to take advantage of her. She spoke of friends lost, of brief moments of safety, and of the constant need to adapt. Elias listened, captivated not only by the stories themselves, but by the wisdom and insight behind them. He could see that she was not bitter, despite all she had endured. Instead, she carried herself with quiet dignity and resilience. At one point, Nayeli reached into her satchel and pulled out a small, worn piece of cloth. She held it carefully, almost reverently. "This belonged to my mother," she said. "It reminds me of home, of who I am, and why I cannot give up. It is small, but it carries everything I have left of my family." Elias nodded, understanding the importance of such a connection in a world where so much had been lost. The fire crackled and the desert wind whispered through the rocks. Elias realized that this was more than a journey of survival. It was a journey of trust, understanding, and connection. Nayeli had shared a part of herself that few would ever see, and he felt honored to be there, to witness her strength, and to offer his support. As dawn approached, they prepared to move again. The desert was not forgiving, and they knew that staying in one place too long was dangerous. Nayeli checked their supplies, ensuring water and food were sufficient, while Elias inspected their tools and weapons. They moved silently, understanding that every sound could alert potential threats. Along the way, Nayeli led Elias to a hidden canyon she had discovered earlier in her travels. It was narrow and winding, with high walls that offered shelter and a clear vantage point of the surrounding land. "This will be our path for a while," she said. "It is not easy, but it is safe. Few will follow here, and we can move without being seen." Elias followed closely, impressed by her knowledge of the terrain. "You've traveled this land more than anyone I know," he said. "It is remarkable how well you understand it." Nayeli smiled faintly, her eyes scanning the canyon walls. "It is not just the land," she said. "It is understanding people, knowing how they think, and anticipating their moves. The desert is alive, and you must learn to read it as you would a person. Listen, watch, and move with it. If you do, it becomes your ally instead of your enemy." As they continued through the canyon, Elias could see the truth in her words. The desert was not just a backdrop for their journey. It was a living, breathing challenge that demanded attention, respect, and careful planning. Nayeli had mastered this art, and he was learning alongside her, gaining insight and confidence with each step. By mid-afternoon, they reached a small oasis, hidden behind a cluster of rocks and shaded by a few stubborn trees. The water was clear, and the area offered shelter from the sun. They rested, filling their containers and taking a brief break to eat. Nayeli's movements were calm and deliberate, and Elias found himself marveling at her skill and resilience. While resting, Nayeli spoke again, her tone more reflective. "I have not shared everything with you yet," she said. "There are parts of my journey that are still painful, memories that I carry but do not speak of often. I will tell you when the time is right, because you need to understand my past to know why I fight, why I survive, and why I trust so few people." Elias nodded, understanding that trust was earned, and that she had chosen to share her story with him gradually. "I will listen whenever you are ready," he said, "and I will respect what you choose not to share. You do not owe me anything except your trust if you feel it is deserved." Nayeli's eyes softened slightly and she nodded. "That is fair," she said. "We have learned from each other in the past days. You have shown me patience, skill, and kindness, qualities that are rare in this world. That is why I am telling you now, and why I will continue to share, step by step, as we move forward." As the sun began to set, painting the canyon in warm hues of orange and gold, they prepared to make camp once more. The desert night would be cold, and they needed shelter. Nayeli chose a small alcove in the canyon wall, protected from wind and hidden from sight. They built a small fire and sat close, sharing a simple meal and a quiet understanding. Elias realized that this journey was no longer just about survival. It was about learning, growing, and building a bond of trust and respect. Nayeli's past had shaped her, but her courage and wisdom defined her present. And in sharing her story, she was teaching him not only about the desert and its dangers, but about life, resilience, and the strength that comes from enduring hardship. As the night deepened and stars filled the sky, Elias and Nayeli sat in quiet reflection, knowing that their journey was far from over. Challenges awaited them, secrets would be revealed, and dangers would rise again. But for now, they had each other, and that connection was stronger than any threat. The desert was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable. Yet in that hidden canyon, Elias and Nayeli found a moment of peace, a moment to rest, to prepare, and to understand that the path ahead, though uncertain, could be faced together. And with that understanding, they slept, ready to face whatever trials the desert or life itself might place before them. The morning air was sharp and clear. The desert stretched endlessly around Elias and Nayeli. The recent days had been full of tension, learning, and survival, but this morning felt different. There was a sense of purpose in the air, a quiet anticipation that neither of them could ignore. Nayeli moved with her usual precision, adjusting the knives and tools in her satchel, checking each one carefully. Elias watched her, sensing that something was about to change. They had learned to move together as a team, to trust each other, and to understand each other's strengths. But Nayeli had been carrying something more than just the weight of survival. She had carried a decision in her heart, a truth she was finally ready to speak aloud. As they made their way through a narrow canyon, Nayeli paused, turning to Elias with steady eyes. "There is something I need to say," she began. Her voice was calm, but it carried a determination that made Elias stop in his tracks. "You have helped me more than anyone ever has. You have taught me to trust, to prepare, and to survive. But I need you to know, I cannot walk this path alone anymore." Elias blinked, caught off guard by the weight of her words. He had come to admire her courage, her skill, and her wisdom. But this was something different. This was personal, heartfelt, and unshakable. "Nayeli," he started, unsure how to respond. She stepped closer, her eyes meeting his directly. "I have been running for so long, living in fear, moving through the desert with only what I could carry and the knowledge I have learned. You gave me steel, tools, and guidance, and you made me stronger in ways I never imagined. And now, I claim you." Her words were steady, bold, and filled with meaning. "Not as a possession, but as someone I trust, someone I choose to stand with, always." Elias felt a mixture of awe, respect, and an unexplainable warmth spread through him. He realized that their connection was no longer just about survival or training. It was about partnership, about choosing to face the world together. For years, he had lived in the quiet of his forge, isolated and careful. But Nayeli's declaration shattered that routine. She had brought a fire into his life, fierce and undeniable. They moved together cautiously, aware that the desert could still hold threats. But now their steps were lighter, infused with a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. Nayeli led, showing Elias hidden paths, small caves for shelter, and water sources that only someone familiar with the land could know. Each turn in the canyon, each careful movement reminded Elias of her skill and courage. She had always survived, but now she was thriving, and he was part of it. By late afternoon, they reached a small plateau overlooking a wide valley. The wind carried the scents of the desert, the distant smell of sage and dry earth, and the sound of a small creek far below. They paused, taking in the view. Nayeli set down her satchel and pulled out the knives and tools they had forged together. She laid them on a flat rock, inspecting each one as though they were extensions of her own hands. "These tools," she said softly, "are more than just steel. They are proof of our trust, our work, and our choices. They are part of the path we have walked together, and they will help guide us forward." Elias nodded, understanding her meaning. Every knife, every small tool had been shaped not only with fire and metal, but with thought, patience, and care. Each item symbolized the lessons they had learned together, the challenges they had faced, and the dangers they had survived. They were practical, yes, but also deeply symbolic, a reminder that they were no longer alone in the world. As the sun began to sink low in the sky, Nayeli stood tall, facing Elias. "I have fought for freedom for so long," she said, her voice strong and steady. "I have learned to rely on no one but myself, but you have shown me that choosing someone to trust does not weaken me. It makes me stronger, and I choose you, not just as a companion in survival, but as a partner in everything we face from now on." Elias felt a surge of emotion, realizing the depth of her words. He had always believed his life would remain solitary, defined by work and routine, but Nayeli had opened a new path, one of connection, courage, and shared purpose. He stepped closer, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "I accept," he said simply, "not out of obligation, but because I want to, because I trust you, and I choose you as well." The wind carried their words across the valley, blending with the sound of rustling leaves and distant bird calls. In that moment, the desert seemed vast but welcoming, as if the land itself recognized the bond they had formed. They stood together, side by side, acknowledging the choice they had made and the journey that lay ahead. As night fell, they made camp on the plateau. The stars above were brilliant, more numerous than Elias had ever seen. Nayeli laid out the tools and knives beside the fire, while Elias prepared a simple meal. They ate quietly, the silence between them comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. Later, as they sat by the fire, Nayeli spoke again, softer this time. "I used to believe that trust was a weakness," she said. "I thought relying on anyone would only put me in danger. But now I see that trust, when given wisely, becomes a strength. It allows you to face challenges not alone, but together, and to find courage in another's presence." Elias listened, feeling a deep connection to her words. He had learned many things in the past days, about the desert, about survival, and about courage. But this lesson of trust and partnership was the most important. He realized that their bond was not only about facing external danger, but about finding strength, resilience, and hope in each other. The following morning, they prepared to move again, following a hidden trail that Nayeli had discovered in her travels. The desert stretched wide and endless, but with the knowledge, tools, and trust they shared, it felt navigable, almost welcoming. Nayeli led with confidence, while Elias followed with attention and readiness. Every step was deliberate, every movement cautious, yet full of purpose. Along the way, they encountered small challenges, a fallen tree across the path, rough terrain, and distant signs of travelers they could not yet see. Each time, they relied on their combined skills. Nayeli's sharp observation, honed by years of survival, complemented Elias's strength, patience, and craftsmanship. Together, they navigated the desert efficiently, avoiding danger while learning more about the land and each other. By late afternoon, they reached a hidden canyon, a place Nayeli had used before as a temporary shelter. The walls offered protection from the wind, and the natural formations provided excellent concealment. They set up camp, arranging the tools and knives carefully. Nayeli inspected each one, ensuring they were ready for any challenge, while Elias prepared the fire and gathered water. Sitting beside the fire, Nayeli looked at Elias, her eyes calm and resolute. "We have faced danger, learned from it, and grown stronger together," she said. "But the world will continue to test us. There will be more challenges, more people who seek to harm or stop us. But we are ready. We have chosen each other, and that choice gives us strength." Elias nodded, feeling a deep sense of purpose. He had known skill and strength, but this, trust, partnership, and choice, was something deeper, something that gave meaning to every step of their journey. They had survived the desert, outwitted trackers, and learned from each other, but now they had something even stronger, a bond that could not be broken by fear, distance, or danger. As night fell, they lay beneath the stars, the desert quiet and still around them. Elias thought of the forge where they had first met, the knives and tools that had brought them together, and the long journey that had tested their courage and resilience. Nayeli rested beside him, her presence steady and comforting. They had chosen each other, and that choice had transformed their journey from one of mere survival into one of purpose, trust, and partnership. The desert night stretched on, vast and eternal, but Elias and Nayeli faced it with calm and confidence. They had survived together, learned together, and chosen to stand together. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges yet to come, but they knew they would face it as a team, and in that understanding they found not only safety, but hope, strength, and the certainty that their bond would carry them through whatever lay ahead. Their story, born in fire, forged in steel, and tested by the desert, had reached a moment of clarity and choice. Nayeli's bold declaration, her trust, and Elias's acceptance marked the beginning of a new chapter. No longer were they simply a fugitive and a blacksmith. They were partners, equals, and companions, bound by courage, respect, and the shared journey that had transformed them both. And so, beneath the endless desert sky with the stars as their witnesses, Elias and Nayeli prepared to face the future, together, strong and unyielding, ready for whatever the world might bring.